Good day to everyone, and I would like to thank the Philippine Lipid and Atherosclerosis Society for allowing me to revisit this topic. The common coconut is so ubiquitous to us in the Philippines because it is a source of food, shelter, and fuel for many of us, and practically all our islands are planted with coconut trees. Coconut derivatives are some of the largest Philippine export products, so any discussion on coconuts usually elicits both pride and trepidation, especially when it comes to its oil. People always ask about the fat content of these common foods. I just want to point out that coconut water, or what we call buko juice, is 95% water, and its natural form carries only 0.2 grams of fat per 100 grams. Gata, on the other hand, is 71% water, but it contains 20 grams of fat for every 100 grams. So please be guided when you are tempted to eat huge portions of kakanin or ginataan. As mentioned earlier, coconut oil is a product which has reaped the most praise and criticism, especially when it comes to health issues. Allow me to acquaint you with two basic types of coconut oil. First, there is the refined, bleached, and deodorized, or RBD oil, which is an important component in the production of margarine, shortening, ice cream, and baked goods internationally due to its neutral taste and resistance to rancidity, which allows the food products to stay on the shelves longer. This RBD oil is the one that was used for most of the clinical trials up to the 1990s. Then there is virgin coconut oil, which became commercially available in the 2000s due to the rising demand for healthy and raw foods. The term virgin refers to the fact that it is minimal to no heat is used to produce it, unlike RBD oil, which undergoes intense heat during industrial processing. Now, there are three biggest issues thrown at coconut oil, and we will tackle each one in turn. The first question is a simple chemistry issue. Saturated fats are fatty acids whose carbon chains have no double bonds, unlike monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids. If we look at the fatty acid composition of coconut oil, you will notice that it is composed primarily of lauric acid, which has 12 carbons and no double bonds, myristic acid, which has 14 carbons and no double bonds, and caprylic acid, which has 8 carbons and no double bonds. So 92% of its fatty acid composition is saturated, and there is no getting around that. So the answer to this question is yes, coconut oil is a saturated fat. The next question now brings into focus MCT oil. MCT, or medium-chain triglycerides, are made up of saturated fatty acids containing 6 to 12 hydrocarbons only. These have been differentiated from the long-chain triglycerides in the manner by which it is absorbed and metabolized in the body. Because it is shorter, it does not require digestion by biliary and pancreatic acids. It is absorbed directly into the portal circulation and is metabolized quickly in the liver. This is why the net caloric value of MCTs are lower at 8.3 calories per gram than the 9.2 calories per gram of the long-chain triglycerides, and this is the basis for some claims related to weight management. Commercially, however, this ease of intestinal absorption has been translated into MCT oil-containing medical nutrition products, which are indicated for malabsorption syndromes due to digestive enzyme insufficiencies or gastrointestinal complications of cancer, surgery, or trauma. MCT oil is also incorporated into special neonatal feeding formulas. This way, enteral feeding can be sustained instead of shifting the patients to parenteral nutrition. Commercially produced MCT oils derive their fatty acids primarily from coconut oil and contain only caprylic and capric acid and are completely saturated. However, one should not forget that MCT oil is a processed oil, not easily available and quite expensive. So, is coconut oil the same as MCT oil? Well, as you already saw, fatty acid composition of the two oils are different, and the answer is no, they are not the same. However, there are many supplements in the market that make such claims, so consumers should be aware of the differences for the health of their bodies and their pocketbooks. Now let's go back to medium-chain triglycerides. Remember that MCTs, which contain fatty acids with 8 to 12 carbons, are absorbed easily and metabolized quickly. Using this logic, wouldn't that mean that coconut oil, which is 63% medium-chain fatty acids, should theoretically be absorbed quickly and metabolized as easily? And that is exactly what coconut oil proponents are saying. However, the bone of contention is the 47% lauric acid and whether or not it behaves as an MCT or an LCT. There are many conflicting statements about this in the literature, and I really wish that the chemists and the physiologists would just settle this issue by maybe tagging the oil and following its absorption and metabolism in the body, if that is possible. And this brings us to the last issue. Does coconut oil have adverse lipid effects? In 2020, the journal Circulation published the systematic review and meta-analysis of clinical trials from a group in Singapore. They focused on the effect of coconut oil consumption on blood lipids in comparison with other cooking oils. They took the view that lauric acid content of coconut oil behaves biologically like a long-chain triglyceride and is therefore atherogenic, just like the long-chain saturated fats, which have been implicated in the formation of atherosclerotic plaques. Their research included published reports until 2019, and 16 articles were evaluated. Their results showed that coconut oil significantly increased LDL cholesterol by 10.47 milligrams per deciliter and increased HDL cholesterol by 4 milligrams per deciliter when compared to non-tropical vegetable oils. They also determined that coconut oil had no beneficial effects on markers for glycemia, inflammation, and adiposity. The authors basically discounted the impact of the increase in HDL by stating that previous efforts to reduce cardiovascular risk by increasing HDL levels have been unsuccessful. So their evaluation was that coconut oil is not healthy for cardiovascular disease risk reduction and intake should be limited. This article was accompanied by a stinging editorial from Frank Sachs from the Nutrition Department of the Harvard School of Public Health, where he noted that there is no randomized clinical trial to determine the effect of coconut oil on cardiovascular events, and that such a trial will never be done because of the huge costs associated with it. Nonetheless, he acknowledged that this is a stumbling block that is applicable to most nutrition research. Dr. Sachs went on to call coconut oil as one of the most deleterious cooking oils that increases risk for cardiovascular disease. In fact, he states that it should not be used as a cooking oil and may be used sparingly only for flavor or texture. Now, Dr. Sachs happens to sit in the panel that produced the 2021 American Heart Association Dietary Guidance to Improve Cardiovascular Health, which was published in December 2021. Here they stated that poor diet quality is strongly associated with elevated risk of cardiovascular disease mortality and morbidity, so they wanted to emphasize the importance of dietary patterns beyond individual foods or nutrients, among others. Here is the 10-point guidance that they issued, and I would like to draw your attention to item number 5, where they specified that liquid plant oils should be used instead of tropical oils, animal fats, and partially hydrogenated fats, with a special mention of coconut oil. But this has been the attitude of the American cardiovascular health establishment for the last few decades. Now let's look at an umbrella review of meta-analysis and systematic reviews by a group from the Mahidol University in Thailand and published in the journal Nutrients in 2021. The group wanted to investigate the lipid effects of oils commonly used in tropical and Asian countries. Their findings showed that replacing polyunsaturated fatty acids with coconut oil significantly increased HDL and total cholesterol, but not LDL. They also mentioned in their text that when coconut oil was substituted for butter, there was a significant decrease in LDL and total cholesterol and an increase in HDL. They concluded that replacement of unsaturated plant-derived fats with plant-derived saturated fats slightly increased LDL, but also increased HDL, which in turn may exert a neutral effect on cardiovascular health. The authors echoed the observation that no prospective studies or randomized controlled trials have specifically assessed the impact of coconut oil on cardiovascular outcomes, and that observational data have shown that indigenous populations consuming coconut as their staple foods have low incidences of cardiovascular diseases, although their diets do not contain high proportions of saturated fats, and they consumed coconut flesh or squeezed coconut as part of a traditional diet rather than coconut oil. Finally, let's look at a randomized controlled trial conducted in the UK whose aim was to compare directly the effects of extra virgin coconut oil and butter, which are both saturated fats, versus extra virgin olive oil, which is a monounsaturated fatty acid. Subjects were randomized into 3 arms and were supposed to consume 50 grams of oil or butter daily for 1 month. This was the largest trial reported, at least until 2017, on coconut oil and lipids. After 4 weeks of treatment, they reported that butter significantly increased LDL concentration versus coconut and olive oil. But against expectation, coconut oil was not significantly different from olive oil, except that coconut oil produced significantly higher HDL and a lower C-reactive protein level. The authors concluded that butter and virgin coconut oil, despite being predominantly saturated fats, still behaved differently with regards to its impact on lipid profiles, and that in this trial, the store-bought extra virgin coconut oil had similar effects to the store-bought extra virgin olive oil. But this statement about the need to go beyond simplistic associations between individual nutrients and health outcomes and instead examine foods and dietary patterns as a whole is what resonated with me. This is exactly why the current thrust in the European cardiology community is to emulate the Mediterranean lifestyle with a more fish and plant-based diet, increased activity levels, and proper stress management, instead of simply recommending the intake of extra virgin olive oil. So, let's do a recap. Yes, coconut oil is a predominantly saturated fat. It is not the same as the commercially processed MCT oil, but it is made up of 63% medium-chain triglycerides containing 8 to 12 hydrocarbons. Yes, undue intake of coconut oil can increase your LDL levels, but will also push up your HDL levels. But what does that mean for us doctors and the general public? At this point, it would be prudent to advise our friends, relatives, and patients to abide by the general recommendations from national heart health organizations abroad, to keep total fat intake at below 30% of total calories within the context of a healthy lifestyle. If you already have a high-risk lipid profile or already have coronary atherosclerosis, then further restrictions may be needed. Of course, that lower fat recommendation may not be easy for many folks, but if it's feasible, then the next step is to shift to a more plant-based diet, which would be associated with consumption of more polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. Well, as I said earlier, I wish that definitive research would resolve the question of whether coconut oil behaves like a medium-chain triglyceride or a long-chain triglyceride. But MCT or LCT, you still cannot chug coconut oil or olive oil or any other oil that you want. Oils, by definition, are 100% fats. So at the very least, you will gain weight, and at worst, you will clog your arteries. I wanted to end by showing you the latest dietary guidelines from the Philippines. Unfortunately, there were none available online from the Philippine Heart Association nor from the Philippine Lipid and Atherosclerosis Society. The best I could find was this 2012 Nutrition Guidelines for Filipinos from the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, whose recommendation on fat intake was limit intake of salty, fried, fatty, and sugar-rich foods to prevent cardiovascular disease. This was followed by the 2018 Pinggang Pinoy campaign, which modified the statement to limit salty, fried, fatty, and sugar-rich foods to prevent chronic disease. At least, the FNRI used the daily food pyramid to specify how much fats and oils you can take, depending on whether you are an adult or an older person aged 60 and above. So we come back to our beautiful tree of life, and as we look up to its majestic crown of leaves, we wonder, is it time to take a stand for or against the oil that has been with us in one form or another all our lives? To that I say there are no bad foods. We only get into trouble when we take too much of anything. And a prudent diet and a healthy lifestyle will always have some room for the occasional indulgence, whatever that may be. Maraming salamat po.